My love letter to Halo. Halo CE single-handedly made me who I am. Dramatic? Maybe. But also more true than you might think. To get you to understand what this game means to me, you're gonna be joining me on a fun little journey to the past. All the way back to Christmas 2003. Yeah, I am that old. I lived with just my mum at the time, back in my home country, as my dad had traveled to a foreign and unknown land called the UK for work. He'd send us stuff all the time, from VHS tapes to DVDs, when those became the norm. Hell, without all the media he sent back for me and my mum to watch, I probably wouldn't even be able to speak English half as well as I do. It's where I learned the language, but more than that, the entire reason I don't have an accent like you would expect from a Eastern European person is because I watched those hundreds of films over and over again. I picked up a very interesting mix and match way of talking from all of them. A bit from here, a bit from there, which is why I sound the way I do today. However, back on topic. On that fateful 2003 Christmas, my 5-year-old self would receive a gift from my dad, which would change me for the rest of my life. Of course, having gotten used to him sending me the coolest stuff, I couldn't wait to see what it was. I tore that package to pieces, looking for the gold buried beneath. My impatience was almost palpable. What did I find? An original Xbox with a Duke controller and 3 games. You probably don't need me to tell you that one of those games was Halo Combat Evolved. Now, I may not have lived in a city or had access to the most up-to-date technology back then, but I had played games before, a ton of them. From Duck Hunt and Mario on a cousin's N64, to Metal Slug on an arcade machine, to small little things that my atrocious laptop could run here or there. However, none of them really grabbed me. I could appreciate gaming. I was a child after all, who wasn't entranced by anything with flashing lights at that age. Yet none of them had sold me on the idea of video games as a real hobby yet. You could say that they just hadn't quite hit the spot. Everything changed when I put that disc into my Xbox. As the Bungie Studios intro played, I wasn't sure what to expect, but then it hit. Have you ever heard something so beautiful that you just dropped everything you were doing? The main menu theme of Halo CE was unlike anything I had ever imagined coming from a video game before. I remember sitting there and listening all the way until the track looped in on itself and being awestruck. Martin O'Donnell is now a legendary name, well known for the work he did for the original Halo trilogy, and for good reason. This was magic. Of course, then I hit the new game button. A whole new world. I am truly at a loss for words at how quickly Halo grabs you with its setting and story. Immediately, the game opens on the Pillar of Autumn, one of the coolest ship names ever, fleeing from this alien threat known as the Covenant. After a blind lightspeed jump, it finds itself floating within view of the game's namesake, Halo. A colossal floating ring-shaped structure that at the time blew my mind. Just one look at it and I couldn't help but feel a burning curiosity. There was so much mystery and foreboding hanging over this simple, floating megastructure that even at the age of 5, I was beyond interested in the story of a video game and what I would discover playing it. Of course, the Covenant instantly attack, and your character, Master Chief, is brought out of cryostasis to fight for his life and escape from the now doomed ship. After some combat and being introduced to the grunts and elites of the Covenant, as well as meeting Cortana, who would become one of the most iconic characters of this franchise and even gaming, and Captain Keyes, you get handed a gun and you are told to make your way off the ship and crash land onto Halo. This setup is perfect. It is incredibly tight and simple, never going overboard with dialogue or exposition. It never tells you too much or overloads you with information that is unnecessary. Halo had, out of the gate, mastered the hardest task for a game: to get the player's attention and force them to start asking questions about the world, the characters, the fascinating looking enemies they were being faced with, and the complete unknown that the game tosses you into head first. I remember my head spinning by the time I set foot on the ring. With Master Chief the only survivor of the escape pod, you have to quickly acquaint yourself with this new environment, a mix of alien and artificial, but also tinged with an almost earthly familiarity. Every single level in this package is bursting with atmosphere and personality, which makes each one stand out and remain memorable years later. There's few video games where I can even recall the name of every level by heart. Halo CE is one of them, because even with the reuse of a few areas, namely in Two Betrayals, Keyes, and the Maw, it still manages to distinguish them. When you revisit these levels, you're no longer just being pitted against the Covenant, but two new factions which have been introduced. These previously pristine areas are now massive war zones, damaged and barely holding together as the factions at play fight not only you for control of the ring, but each other. And let's not just skim over the other factions that Bungie introduced in this game, because one of them has maybe the single coolest reveal in gaming. Look, it's a game from 2001. Do I even need to warn you that the video is gonna have spoilers? Get ready for them. The Flood and Air intro in the level 343 Guilty Spark is one of the most effective uses of dread and foreboding I've come across to this day. Captain Keyes and a number of other Marines have gone missing, and you go to check their last known location. What you are met with is this area draped by a thick fog. A wet, rainy night in a massive jungle that seems to go on forever. The music has subsided, allowing for the mood to truly seep in. Surrounded by the noise of rain and coming across a number of Covenant corpses, you push forward, but at the edges of the fog and at the corner of your eyes, there are things watching you, moving through the jungle. You run into a few small scattered Covenant groups here and there, but to your surprise, they're staring off into the fog, waiting for something. Some are even running and screaming for their lives. For the first time in Halo, you are no longer the greatest threat to these enemies. Something has spooked them far more than even Master Chief, a super soldier turned alien killing machine, seems to. But you push forward, the sensation that something bad is on the horizon scratching away at the back of your head. You find one of the many monolithic structures that dot the ring, left behind by some long-gone alien race, and you head inside, only to find doors barricaded by the Covenant, entrances blocked, pools of blue alien blood smeared across the floors, walls, and ceilings of the structure, and the deeper you go, the greater the signs of absolute butchery become. You even find a crazed Marine, babbling incoherently and firing at you if you get too close, having seemingly gone mad from whatever it was he witnessed. The next Marine you find is dead. However, his helmet has recorded everything he and the captain saw when they came here.
Which is weird, right? I mean, look at it. Something scrambled the insides.
What's that? Plasma scoring?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there was an accident, you know, friendly fire or something?
What do we have, Sergeant?
Looks like a Covenant patrol. Badass elite units. All KIA.
Real pretty. Friend of yours?
Nah, we just met.
Right, well, let's get this door open.
I'll try, sir. But it looks like these Covenant worked pretty hard to lock it down.
Just do it, son.
Yes, sir. I got a bad feeling about this.
Boy, you always got a bad feeling about something.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
What's going on, soldier?
We've got contact. Lots of them. But they're not Covenant. They're just staring through us. What the? Oh, no!
Corporal! Do you copy? Over! Mendoza, get your ass back up to second squad's position and find out what the hell is going on.
But...
I don't have time for your lip, soldier! I gave you an order!
Sarge! Listen!
What is that? Where's that coming from,
Everywhere.
Mendoza?
I don't... There! Mira!
Hold still! Hold still! Let him have it! Sergeant, we're surrounded. God damn it, Jenkins! Fire your weapon!
There are too many,
Don't
Sarge!
even think about it, Marine.
Oh, this is local!
Get back here, Marine! That's an order!
Jenkins!
Just like that, you are now thrown into combat against the Flood, a parasite that repurposes the corpses of both ally and enemy into its own twisted forms. There are very few games with the massive brass balls to introduce a completely different enemy type halfway through the runtime, one whose threat is so great that the stakes are instantly raised. Suddenly, this is no longer a run-of-the-mill story of some super soldier fighting colorful aliens on a space ring. The aliens made the mistake of letting out the true horror, a parasite that could extinguish all life in the universe. And 343 Guilty Spark, the annoying flying robot who you find out is trying to fire Halo, which has actually been a super weapon that can wipe out all life within 25,000 light years of distance. The entire time. Designed to kill all potential food for the Flood and thus starve it out. This not only adds new lifeblood to the story, it completely revamps the tone. Suddenly things seem a lot darker. The consequences of Master Chief failing are much greater than just the Covenant winning. The Flood, as their namesake suggests, will engulf all life in the universe if allowed to, and Halo could end all life in the universe if fired. Let's not even gush about the fact that I love cosmic horror, and that the Flood fits the bill pretty perfectly in both aesthetic and narrative role. Seeing this terrifying new enemy that literally takes the flesh of the dead and twists it into disgusting looking monstrosities is as Lovecraftian as it gets around these parts. This is what the story and world of Halo knocks out of the park. You are faced with such mystery and so many questions. As the game goes on, you discover much more. But with each discovery, there's another thread you'll want to unravel. There's more you'll need to see. The stakes will compel you forward. The hunger to understand this ring and all of these horrors buried deep within it will be the driving force that pushes you in what is truly the most extraordinary aspect of this game: the combat. Sandbox Evolved. I had never before played an FPS on a console at the age of 5. I'd tried a few on a friend's PC, but I never really had the time to get stuck into those since I saw that friend maybe twice a year or less. Imagine my surprise when I picked up the controller after having only ever played an FPS with a mouse, and it felt utterly perfect in my hands. Okay, Maybe not physically speaking, cause the Duke was colossal, and I was a child, so I could barely hold the damn thing without my wrists getting tired. But I'm talking about the game feel. Bungie did something at the time that no other developer had managed. They created the perfect console FPS. When it states Combat Evolved on the box, this is some accurate advertising. I had never before played a game where you used a dual stick control scheme to both aim and move. I know there's an Alien Resurrection game on the PS1 that did it first, but Bungie got it right. There's something about the way they implemented the systems that make Halo what it is. The just enough amount of aim magnetism and stick to your crosshair, and the shots themselves. The way every button on the controller just felt like it made sense for the function it was assigned. There's a reason shooters copied so much about Halo CE for so long afterwards, because it nailed everything when it came to the gameplay and controls of a console shooter. However, it wasn't just the controls. Everything feels so good. The feedback of the weapons when you fire them still activates my neurons every single shot.
Hey, quit hugging them all! Oh, Leo. Nice shot.
The fact that every weapon in the game has its own role, literally from the dinky plasma pistol with its shield annihilating charge shot to the legendary Magnum and its ability to mop up any small mob with a single tap to the head. And those are the most basic and least creative weapons at play. I mean, look at the Needler, a weapon that truly looks and feels alien to anything I had ever seen or used before. The Covenant and human weapons are so distinct and successful at highlighting the difference between the factions that they're not just good for gameplay, but good for world building. You can glean so much from the fact that all the Covenant use energy weapons, whereas the UNSC use conventional firearms of the kind you're used to, but with a sheen of industrial futurism on top. You'll notice that bullets are less effective at breaking shields than well-placed plasma and energy shots. You'll be able to infer that there's a reason humanity is struggling in this battle, a reason that the Pillar of Autumn started the game by trying to escape the enemy. All this achieved by this incredibly detailed arsenal, where every weapon fills a role and manages to be more unique than the offerings of hundreds of other shooters. The Sandbox goes further than even that. Do you have any idea how I felt the first time I was given a Warthog and realized that Halo allowed you to traverse these levels using fully controllable vehicles? I honestly remember pausing the game and just shouting. At nobody in particular, because of how revolutionary this was to me at the time. These levels are so grand and intoxicatingly intricate in areas. There are moments where you can outrace the enemy to their own vehicles and steal them. You can jump into a Banshee and fly freely around the area in Assault on the Control Room, living out your wildest fantasies of being a starship pilot and doing strafing runs Star Wars style. The way this game just seamlessly implemented a constant transitioning between on-foot and vehicle combat introduced me to something I never even knew I wanted. To make it even more special, there are games that to this day screw up this part of their sandbox. So many shooters that have vehicles that feel like crap or don't naturally fit into the flow of the sandbox that they're a part of. Speaking of levels, some of these battlefields feel so perfectly crafted for the enemies and engagements you're dropped into. I instantly think about the twin bridges throughout 2 Betrayals, where you're fighting both Flood and Covenant on 2 different areas and at the same time, while trying to progress forward. There was just nothing else that had ever put me in these kinds of scenarios, no gameplay loop that had ever rewarded my creativity and problem solving under duress to the degree that Combat Evolved had managed. This is the first experience where I realized that gameplay is everything. And if you get that right, you can get someone to sink hundreds of hours replaying these amazing battles. And Bungie realized it too. Bungie's design lead of Halo 2, Jamie Grissomer, once famously said, "If you can get 30 seconds of fun, you can pretty much stretch that out to be an entire game." He was right. That's what this game offers. A constant on and off. Every single engagement leads right back into those 30 seconds of fun. 30 seconds in which anything can happen. From a banshee crashing into the battlefield, to 2 hunters walking out and completely changing the dynamic and your battle plan. Those 30 seconds are the liquid gold that flowed through Halo's veins, and a 5-year-old me finally understood why video games were the future. Part and parcel of what facilitates this incredible loop is also just how amazing the AI was for the time. The Covenant are always so interesting to fight. You compare Halo CE to certain modern day FPS and you'll see the difference instantly. In Halo there were squad structures to the enemies. You knew that if you killed the elite of a group, the grunts would panic and scatter. You realized that if you stuck a grunt, they would sometimes run right into their own allies and blow up an entire squad. The enemies also had this way of moving. Grunts are always running around. Elites will actively dodge and roll out of danger, whether from one of your thrown grenades or you trying to run them over with a vehicle. You don't feel like you were fighting brainless idiots who do nothing but stand still and aim at you until you shoot them. The Covenant felt alive and thinking. There were so many scenarios where they would outflank you, outplay you, and even do something surprising like land a sticky right on you or your vehicle. An oh shit moment like nothing else. Plus, the Covenant have such variety. Everyone thinks of the elites and grunts, but then you had jackals, which forced you to either deal with their shields or better aim your shots to hit them in the exposed areas. Hunters, who frankly used to scare the crap out of me. While they can be dispatched easily if you know to grab the magnum and put one in their exposed back, the moment they enter the battle, they completely change the dynamics of things. You suddenly know that they are the priority. Everything else can wait. Hell, the Covenant have vehicles too. You have to fight them on the ground and in the air. Sometimes Banshees will swoop in and try to get you, while ground forces have you pinned down. Wraiths will fire their plasma mortar at you with some precision, so if you're on foot and don't have a vehicle, they become massive threats. Even the fact that the 3 factions, the Covenant, the Flood, and 343 with his Sentinels, will engage each other anytime they're both on the battlefield makes it feel so much more engaging. You can even choose to help deal with the side that you find more difficult right away. Enemy of my enemy is my friend style. How many games could have claimed to offer this kind of sandbox at the time? Massive battles spanning what felt like mini open world sections of levels, where your enemies were smarter than they had any right to be, and would battle both you and each other successfully, while still remaining believable threats. I know some people will say, I could go on about this forever, in jest. But I'm not kidding. I could sit here talking about the way the gameplay of Halo CE was just perfect until the stars burn out and the night sky turns to void. The Foundation for Socialization. You know what else completely blew my mind when I was 5? I could play it with a friend. All I needed was that second Duke controller, and boom, suddenly me and my friend of choice could go through the entire story seamlessly together, experiencing all of what made this game so unbelievably fun to play, but with 2 Master Chiefs instead of 1. This was, again, unlike anything I had ever expected to experience from a game. An entire campaign with nothing cut out, no corners cut, all playable from the start to the finish with someone else. All those times I was riding in the Warthog alone, well now there was always someone in the gunner seat. Halo introduced me to my love for co-op and split screen. It showed me that any game that was already amazing could be even more fun if it made it possible to share that experience with someone else. Hell, you all know how impactful this was for me, because I have an entire video on this channel just dedicated to how much I love co-op as a genre now. Well, here you have it. This was the point of origin for this feeling of mine. Co-op took the campaign and made it endlessly replayable. The amount of wacky stuff you could get up to with the help of another person opened up a whole new way to play the game. Suddenly you didn't have to be afraid of dying, because if one of you made it out alive, you were fine. Play got much riskier. Both myself and any friend I played it with suddenly got way more aggressive in our play styles, way more willing to try crazy stuff, like ramping the warthog off a Wraith, or stealing a Banshee and having one of us try and ride on top of it as we dived into battle. It also made me more interested in trying to beat the game on harder and harder difficulties. My first time surmounting Legendary in CE was with the help of one of my best friends on the second controller. The love for difficulty and challenging myself has since carried on. Another thing I did when the MCC brought this game to PC was beat Lasso. That means Legendary with all skulls on for the uninitiated, something that makes the game 10 times more difficult with a friend. Which was both the most frustrating experience I've had in this series, but also the most rewarding. And you'd be surprised how much closer you can grow to someone when you throw yourselves at an insurmountable wall together for hours on end. Of course, it doesn't end there. Co-op was just one of the 2 social elements that Halo started my love for. You see, Halo CE out of the box came with one other feature that Bungie had managed to get in before release. You know where I'm going with this, right? 4-player split-screen PvP. Oh yeah, and that became 8 players if you hooked up 2 consoles through LAN, something I luckily got to experience. Then 12, then 16 if you managed to get 4 Xboxes and 4 televisions in the same room. This was, to me at the time, unbelievable. The amount of time I spent trying to dominate in King of the Hill, or hang onto the skull as long as I could in Oddball, or enjoy the absolutely stupendous vehicle physics in Race, it's frankly more than I could probably count at that age. Halo CE, to me, was truly the complete package with these additions. It offered pretty much everything myself and my friends could ever have wanted from a video game at the time. The Ringworld. There's something extremely unique about the atmosphere that Halo creates. I mentioned how each level is memorable in its visuals and setting, and that's a part of it. For every place you visit on the Ring, Bungie nailed the vibe that it gives off. The Pillar of Autumn feels narrow, claustrophobic, colorless. Its design as restrained as you'd expect from a military organization like the UNSC. Its bareness tells you a lot. You can almost get a feel for how the Marines you fight alongside have to live on these hulking metal behemoths. Always at threat from a Covenant attack, always ready for the frigate to be both their home and their metal coffin. Then there's the Ring itself. That artificiality I spoke about is something that permeates everything about the Halo. The moment you land, it becomes instantly clear that even though the environment looks lush and like it could support much of the same wildlife you'd find on Earth, it all remains barren and empty. Other than you and the Covenant who followed you here, there's not even the slightest sign of life. This is a great touch, as even if unintentional, it perfectly sets up foreshadowing for what the Ring is. It's not just a universal scaled superweapon, it's a place to contain the Flood. Of course there can't be any life on this thing. The Flood would infect it and begin to spread. The Ring being artificial is also what allows for the world to feel cohesive yet have such variety. You go from grassy fields to frozen tundras, all the way to wet swamps and looming jungles, and it all feels natural. Because the Ring itself was clearly constructed by a species older and more capable than any of the ones actually present on it now. If they could build something of this scale and magnitude, why wouldn't they be able to design different segments and biomes that are perfectly contained and cut off from one another? Speaking of this Forerunner race, the most you'll find of them are the metallic structures scattered around the Ring, all of which look suitably alien, with just their size and scale giving you a sense of what the Forerunner might have been and just how capable they were of making grandiose things unlike anything humanity has seen. Well, the structures and of course 343 Guilty Spark and the Sentinels that he can activate to fight both the Flood and yourself. All of this helped Halo CE give off an impression truly its own. By the end of the game, you feel like this is a wide universe full of mystery and worth diving deeper into. The things you find and see throughout the ring make you want to know more, both about the rings themselves but also the Covenant and what their motivations are, the Flood and if there's anything more to it than the dark implications of what they were doing with Keyes on board of the Truth and Reconciliation. After the 30-second loop and after the credits rolled on the story, it was all of this well-crafted atmosphere with all the implications it carried, which left me wanting more. More Halo, of course, but also more from this medium. Halo CE showed me that games had the potential to do things almost no other medium of entertainment could possibly achieve. And it did this at a stage in my mental development where I didn't even realize and appreciate all of this until half a decade later at least, when I was already consuming so much more of what games had to offer. I need a soundtrack. There's a good reason I mentioned that menu suite when I was recounting my experience as a child discovering this game for the first time. Halo might have one of, if not my favorite, soundtrack to a video game ever. Its music resonates far beyond the reaches of the game itself. People who have never played Halo and might not even know a single thing about it have heard that theme. There's something about the way Martin O'Donnell and Michael Salvatore managed to take a beautiful choir of Gregorian chants with stringed instruments like cellos and violins and melded it with a mix of synthesizer, keyboards, and MIDI recorders to just create an audioscape that soothes the very soul. In myself and many others that I know, all it takes is just the start of that choir for us to be transported to the seat of our childhoods and our first experience of Halo. It is one more element that further established this series as iconic, due to both how unique it was, but also just the quality of it. Even critics received the soundtrack overwhelmingly positively, with many arguing that it was one of the few video game OSTs that could be enjoyed completely separately from the game itself. The soundtrack is transcendental. It has transcended the medium it was made for, and now carries more weight than ever. There's a good reason that motifs from the Halo theme have continued to echo throughout every single game in the franchise since and beyond, and even all of the good extended media. Some could easily argue that the sound of Halo has become iconic to video game soundtracks as a whole. When originally released, video games didn't even receive a commercial soundtrack release. But when pressured, Microsoft gave in and made the soundtrack widely available, after Marty and many others petitioned them to. What more can one say about something like this? There are some pieces of music so great that I honestly find myself lost for words. I could describe it more, the instruments used, the vibe and emotion that it invokes within me, but I don't know what to say other than plug some headphones in, get your hands on this OST, and just lay back and take it in. I think we're just getting started. Halo Combat Evolved will probably remain one of the most important pieces of media I have ever consumed until the day I die. It reached me at the perfect time in my formative years and shaped me into who I am today. I can tell you with complete certainty that if this game had not shown me just how much I could love this hobby, I probably wouldn't even be here today. I wouldn't be making these videos. There would be no love letters to any game. It introduced me to my love for games. my love for co-op, my love for good PvP. It introduced me to everything that makes me see this medium the way I do now. It taught me to appreciate the artistry and the hard work put into good games by devs that truly tried to offer you the world itself in a small package. Halo will forever have a place in my heart. There's a reason that no matter how far off the rails the series continues to go, I will always just go back to the original trilogy and to Combat Evolved, to remind myself why I ever bothered with this hobby to begin with. I really hope that some of you managed to get lucky enough to have this same experience that I did with this game. But even if you didn't, Halo CE is timeless. Everything that made it good back then still makes it good now. Whether you want to enjoy it with your friends or get a taste of that 30-second loop for yourselves, trust me when I say this, it is worth every penny and every minute spent. Now don't let me hold you here any longer. Go on and finish the fight. Remember to like, comment, sub, and share the video if you enjoyed it. I still have no social media to speak of, so, I can't really do much more to promote it than that. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this. I will have more videos on the way soon, but I really felt like talking about this game since I had quite a lot to say, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity for another love letter. Thanks for sticking around if you're still listening to this, which, what are you doing here, you crazy bastard? And have a good one. I'll see you on the next video, like always. Bye.